For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God and the salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek.
May God bless you, and I hope this is a great day for you with Christ. Welcome to Today with Christ. I'm Don Smith, and here again with Scott Ingram, and we're really going to do something a little different today on the broadcast. First, let me say that we're glad that you're watching. If you enjoy these programs, write us and let us know. We have no way of knowing whether there's anyone out there unless we hear from you. So you could go to the Radio Bible Hour website and send us a message there. Let us know you're watching the program. Or you can write to us and at the address below here at the Radio Bible Hour, and we would love to hear from you. Recently, in our studio, Kirk Yates came through Newport and spent some time with us, recording some music for the Today with Christ broadcast. Kirk is the worship and music minister at Broadway Baptist Church in Maryville, Tennessee. And I had a chance to sit down and talk with Kirk for about 15 minutes about the state of worship in our churches today. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Talk about this issue of how we worship, what worship means, and what are God's guidelines for worship.
I think it'll surprise people.
I think so too. So now here is the interview with Kirk Yates from Broadway Baptist Church. Let me just start with the basics, Kirk. What is worship?
Well, everyone worships something, Don, and as children of God, we are called to worship Him. And worship is when we declare the worthiness of God, we declare His praise, and we just proclaim with our thoughts and our actions and our words how great of a God He is.
So that's something we can do privately.
That's right.
But we also come together to do it
Corporately.
Publicly, corporate worship, it's
Right.
called.
Yes, and we're called to do both.
Yeah.
Called to be private and corporate worshipers.
And what is your job, as you see it, as a minister, as a servant of God, who's primarily focused on the use of music in worship and in leading worship,
Yes.
and so forth? How do you see that work that you do?
Well, my job is a little bit heavier on the side of music preparation because music is a key aspect of worship, and that's biblical. But in the greater scheme of things, I'm tasked and I'm responsible to make sure that the church, when we come together, is worshiping in an orthodox way, that we're doing things that the way the Bible prescribes us to do. And when we come to worship, we're worshiping God, and we're not worshiping our own traditions or doing things for our own glory or our own benefit. So in the greater scheme of things, it's my job to make sure that we're worshiping the one true God, the one, our Creator, and nothing else. So,
What are some of the changes and trends that you've seen over the last 10 years, Kirk? And maybe I could get you to talk a little bit about the direction that you like to lead your people in worship. I guess there's a lot of learning how to worship too, and there's a lot of misconceptions about worship
yes.
that have come up in the church lately. And if I could get you to talk about that, that'd be
Yeah.
for that.
You see the pendulum swing, and it continues to swing. Sometimes it swings too far. And I'd say, within the last 20 years, we saw this move towards generational churches. And so there's this division, there are these divisions where there's a 20-something or 30-something church, and their focus is primarily contemporary music. And so when you take that element out of the traditional churches, they are left with an older congregation. And so that, what I would say, is not a good trend in and of itself, because when you lose that multi-generational aspect, you lose the teaching aspect. The older congregation is not able to teach the younger folks, and so and then there become these divisions of music and worship and styles. The style of music becomes more important than the message in that case, and that's another scary trend. And so, but there is, I see the pendulum swinging back a little bit towards a proper worship approach, and that is, what does this music, what does the content of our worship say about God? Is it theologically sound? Is it edifying to the church? The style, yes, you want it to be a catchy music, but that's secondary. Primarily is the worship, is the content of our words. Is it orthodox? Is it theologically correct? Is it exalting to God? And so the trend is moving a little bit toward that. It needs to go further.
Okay.
But that, I do see that trend, and it's encouraging.
Yeah. I think one of the ways that music was used traditionally in the church is it's easier to memorize something if you set it to music.
Right.
Just psychologically, it makes the task of memorization easier.
Yes.
And the church, as I understand it, at one time, books were not readily available. In many cultures, books are still not readily available.
Right.
And so it was hard to teach theology by simply passing out a worksheet. And so a lot of theology was communicated and committed to memory through learning hymns, for example. And a lot of the old hymns are so profound in their theology and their ability to integrate the mind and body, as it were, to the emotions and the intellect.
Right.
And that was really one of the great beauties of the old hymns, is that they were not only beautiful and inspiring and uplifting to the soul, but they also had strong intellectual content in doctrine and theology.
That's right.
And it seems like that's kind of what you're saying, that our worship we should worship both in spirit and in truth.
That's it.
And the truth is an intellectual concept, isn't it? It's that content
It is.
that's taught there.
Right.
What are some of the challenges that you face in your role as a worship leader and a musician? You're such an accomplished musician, a pianist that really has an expert level of performance ability as well, and to hear you play is awesome. We're going to give you a chance to play later on, and I'm looking forward to that. But what are some of the challenges that you face in serving God in your role of ministry?
To be honest, keeping people engaged. People are so busy these days. That's one of the greatest challenges, is just the competition and engaging the folks and making sure they have a hunger and a thirst to use those talents. That's one of my greatest challenges, just to be honest with you. Beyond that, technology is one of the big challenges. Finding the right balance of, are we, being relevant, and we do want to be relevant to the younger generations, and so we want to use technology as a tool. We don't want it to become a distraction, and it easily can become a distraction. So we try to find that balance. Those are two of the big challenges, and as a musician, I push myself. I like to see us do the most God-honoring. It has to be worshipful, but musically challenging. I want it to be musically challenging for me and for those that I work with. So finding that music can sometimes be difficult. So
yeah. Well, that's neat. You're also pretty accomplished in the technical skills of music production, and in the technical skills related to information technology, computers, and all that. And how do you see those technologies coming into the church, being used in the church? More and more of the larger churches certainly have dedicated individuals on staff now that do nothing but
Right.
just their computers and the information technology and the application of the electronic technology
Yep.
in the church. And that's a growing role, isn't it,
It
for
is.
young people in the church, perhaps?
It is, and I would say for the most part it's a good thing, because it keeps the congregation engaged. As a musician, I grew up using the hymn book, and part of me hates to see us not using that music in front of us, but there are more people engaged. They're looking up. They're watching the screens, and that's a positive. And then using the internet it's just a huge tool, and it keeps folks in communication with the church. And I see, yes, all those are wonderful things, and I think the church, it's got to try to make that a priority, even more so as we proceed in the future.
One of the interesting things that I was talking with someone about the other day is sometimes our older generation is not comfortable with the new technology. They may not be comfortable using a computer or using just simple technologies like the computer. And I think one of the great ministries in the future is going to be to integrate our older population. As the younger population ages, they're completely comfortable with that technology. But for an aging individual like me, who may have some limitations in what they can do with the technology, it's a great benefit to older people to show them how to connect to the internet, for example, because there's so much wonderful material out there. I mean, you can hear the greatest preachers of the day anytime, day or night, that you want to. And to help our older generation connect with that and to stay connected with the churches. And sometimes we used to have the term shut-in, so the older person who literally couldn't get out of their house. And so, and more the church doesn't really reach out to those people. We can kind of see them get lost. I was talking to an older lady this last week, and she said, I haven't been out of my house for weeks and weeks, and nobody from the church came to see me, and I don't like to bother people. And but the technology can be used to maybe keep our older people connected to the church.
That's right. And the technology is becoming so user-friendly now that any church really can do this. The church where I serve at, we record services. They have a long tradition of a TV ministry, and some fairly nice equipment. But any church can, with a small investment, record their services, put those on disc and take them to these shut-ins. And that's that's the they can do that. And then as we continue down, I think even discs will come out obsolete, and everyone will be accessing the internet. It'll be commonplace. So, but until that happens, it's not a hard thing to do, to get your services on a disc, and that's an important ministry that my church participates in. And
that's great.
And I think just about any church can.
Yeah, well, even I mean, you can buy a DVD player for under $100 now. And what a great ministry for a church to make sure that all their older people have a DVD player.
Exactly.
And maybe a deacon or somebody who's involved in that ministry or a team of young people would be wonderful to go out and hook those DVDs up and give the person a little set of instructions about how to use them and make sure that they're comfortable with that, because any new technology is threatening, no matter how skilled we are when something new comes along. And just with some patience and a little bit of time, those people could be really kept in touch in a way, and their spiritual needs could be met.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah, it is. So, well, it's really, really neat to see what you're doing and to stay in touch. And you're at a wonderful church, Broadway Baptist in Maryville. And if people in that area are looking for a church home, it'd be a great place to go. If you're interested in music performance and choirs and being involved in music, you couldn't have a better director for a music program than this guy sitting right here.
Well,
Kirk Yates, I really appreciate you coming by by the Radio Bible Hour
Excellent, Don.
today. We want to thank Kirk Yates at Broadway Baptist Church for coming and spending some time with us. And in a few minutes, he'll be back to perform with my youngest daughter, Amy, who was in the office that day. And I think you'll enjoy hearing Kirk perform as well. You know, he does the music for us. But some of the points that struck me, Scott, were one of the things where Kirk was talking about how this tendency in churches may be to separate into two churches, where you have an older congregation that likes the more traditional music and more traditional styles of worship, and then the younger people who may prefer the less formal, more contemporary kinds of worship experiences.
Yeah, isn't that where we're just trying to make this about us instead of about God? I mean, really, and worship, the word worship literally meant to show worth in Old English. That's what that word meant. And worship isn't just a place and a time, as Kirk and you both mentioned. It's a way of life. It's part of how we live, how we breathe, how we live this Christian life, always showing worth to God. And the thought that we would actually separate ourselves out just by a preference, it is disturbing to me, because we're really not showing worth to God in that. We're showing worth to our own preference.
And we have kind of two different cultures in our churches, and many of our cultures. And I think it was John Piper has talked about or written about the two cultures. One he calls fine culture, F-I-N-E, fine culture, and the other folk culture. And sort of the fine culture is kind of the highly educated, formal, classically based music, for example, or styles of worship. And then the folk culture might equate or be more like the kind of youth movement and the youth music and the younger music. And he points out that there are dangers in each of these. That the formal culture or the fine culture can become elitist, and people can start to feel superior and contemptuous of others. Whereas the folk culture, it may encourage a kind of laziness or a kind of casual approach to God, who should never be approached casually. And so each of these kind of styles that we see is not the be all and end all. As you're saying, we shouldn't be choosing how we worship based on which style we like better, but rather going back to Scripture and seeing what does God say about worship, because it's Him that we want to please with our worship and no other.
That's exactly right. And it reminds me of when Jesus came upon the woman at the well. He walked up to her, and he was actually digging down into her sin a little bit. Mentioned that she had several husbands and was living with a man at this time, and so she naturally just turned it. Well, where do I need to be worshiping at? You know, she tried to make it into a theological
Which church
discussion.
should I go to? Right?
Yeah. And so she said, "Where do I need to worship at?" And Jesus' answer wasn't go to the church that makes you feel better. It wasn't about go to the temple or go there. He said that worship was of the Jews, that they knew what they worshiped, and that was the point. He tells her that she needs to worship in spirit and in truth. He says that's how all true worshipers are going to worship. What would you make of that, Don, of spirit and truth?
Well, when we talk about spirit, we're talking about the core of our being. The Bible helps us understand that we're talking about the feelings and our emotions, the heart. And so our spirit should be informed. It should cause us to feel something. We should,
absolutely.
But that's not the total of it. And when he says truth, he's talking about, and Kirk and I mentioned that or discussed that a little bit too, that truth is really a concept of the intellect. And so we should be thinking. The mind should be engaged. One of the most dangerous trends, I think, in current worship, and this is something that we really want to emphasize that we do not support, is the idea that in worship we should somehow lose ourselves.
Oh, yes.
And that we should become mindless and just be blown about. That is a very, very dangerous misunderstanding of what worship is, because there's no engagement of the mind in that. So although we are delighted and taking joy and overwhelmed in awe at the presence of God.
Yeah.
That also has a component of understanding Him and being understanding in truth
Yeah.
who He is and what He is.
As I was telling you a little while ago, I've heard of people letting gold dust out of the ceiling and glory clouds and people singing and writhing around, just like you might find in a pagan culture in a foreign land. And that is not Christian worship. Christian worship, as he says, is with your spirit. You know, your joy, you feel. But it's all based on the truths that you know about Jesus Christ.
And, you know, our relationship with the Lord is a relationship of our whole being, of everything that we are, including, and Jesus added that idea of mind to the, you'll love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and thy soul and all that we are. And Jesus included that concept and with your mind, so that we are. It is an activity of the complete person, just recognizing who God is, and when we see that, we will have an experience of worship. Whether we want to or not.
Absolutely,
and,
He'll bring it.
And something else that kind of bothers me, Scott, I see a lot of dramatics and attempts to create some kind of mood in some of the worship things. The lights have to be turned down low, and then you've got to have the right music, and the drums have to be going, and it really is a kind of promotion of a kind of pagan experience, not what's traditionally understood as Christian worship.
Absolutely. And one of the things which I didn't notice until I actually began to study into this, in Hebrews 12:28, it shows us to serve God with reverence and godly fear. Well, that word used, serve, there is also a Greek word that can be translated as worship and is used 21 times in the New Testament in context of that. So that tells us that worship isn't only supposed to be with just spirit and truth, but there is a reverence, a holy, godly fear and awe of the one that you're coming in contact with here. And I wonder how many of us, when we're worshiping, is it all about me, or is it all about this being who I am showing worth to? It's so simple, and yet we can make it so complicated.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, we mentioned a book by A.W. Tozer, Tozer, Knowledge of the Holy. And I found that to be a wonderful book just on the nature of God, and to understand, as I read through that on the attributes of God, to recognize that I had failed to appreciate the grandness and the glory of God. In fact, whatever great thing we can comprehend, God is far beyond that, because our intellectual capability is limited. We cannot understand. As the creation, we cannot comprehend the Creator. Well, let's take a few moments and listen to a song which points to one of these attributes of God. There are many attributes, but one of those qualities or characteristics is the characteristic of unchanging, undying love. My daughter Amy Smith was here with us on the day that Kirk was here visiting in the studio with us, and they sat down to do a quick arrangement of this beautiful, beautiful song. So here is Kirk Yates on piano and my daughter Amy Smith with God is Love Alone.
Amen.
God is love alone, our salvation surely, as Christ did atone for all who've gone astray. And though we cannot earn endless grace and mercy, we are God's concern, and He will never sway. For always, forever, for us He gave Jesus Christ did atone for all who've gone astray. And though we cannot earn endless grace and mercy, we are God's concern, and He will never sway. He will never sway.
That was a truly beautiful song. I'm sure you all enjoyed it. And it just reminds us that the Father loves us. As He says in John 4, as He said to that lady so long ago with the woman at the well, the Father seeketh such to worship Him. I hope that you are going to spend this day in a day of worship to Him.
So let's take some time out of our lives to just spend some time, maybe right now, just worshiping God for who He is. And we hope this is going to be a joyful day with Christ for you. And thanks for watching. This is Don Smith at the Radio Bible Hour. We're glad you're watching Today with Christ. I want to tell you about our monthly publication, The Good Neighbor. It's a great little magazine. We've been publishing it here at the Radio Bible Hour since 1940s, and so it's just a part of who we are. It contains articles and sermons by Dr. J. Harold Smith, other more contemporary issues on Christian living, and some of the difficulties that Christians face today in walking with Christ. I think you'll like this magazine a lot. We publish it 12 times a year, and our subscription price is only $10 a year. If you'd like to receive it, write us, send your subscription to the Radio Bible Hour, and thank you for watching.